in for an interesting election season. Well, the governing All Progressives Congress is facing a gale of defections after its party primaries earlier this month. For more on this, we're now being joined by Rise News analysts Dr. Sam AMADI and Mahmoud JEGA. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
So let me begin by asking you, Dr. Sam AMADI, looks like there's no consequences, no repercussion for defection in Nigeria. Some people will say defection and Nigerian politicians are 5 and 6. But what does this mean for political structure and development of political parties here in Nigeria, especially before a general election in 2023?
Well, thank you. Legally speaking, there are consequences. We know that the Supreme Court has also concluded that for the case of legislators, they are not supposed to, if they leave their parties, they ordinarily ought to forfeit their position. But of course, that has several excuses. Party-to-party crisis can be justification, and oftentimes politicians and their lawyers stretch that. But again, it's not like it has no legal consequence. But the point is that there are people overlook it, the long drawn battle in courts and all that. We saw the case of governors and legislators in Ebonyi, and I think Akwa Ibom or so, where they were declared vacant, and well, they got over those in those cases. So there's a legal consequence. But again, the key issue here is how it plays out with party formation and party structure. First, Nigeria is a party-based democracy, and what that means is that the health of the parties is an indicator of the health of democracy, with no provision for independent candidacy, and so the party aggregate the preference of the people who represent their nominees, and then we vote those nominees. So essentially, if candidates are free to move, as they do, from one to another and back to the other, it removes the attention on building the parties as platforms for getting preference, building social civic consciousness, and then making elections to really represent people's aspiration. So basically, this flip-flopping and this jumping in and out means that the cynical reading of democracy in Nigeria is that political elites as entrepreneurs, basically just the way we do startups, and we defund them when we think they are no longer competitive. So that there is a serious business approach here, which is, look, these are vehicles, like they say, to get to destination, which is a real election. And whenever you are stopped, either from losing primaries or the governor stop you for the case of senators, or whatever reason, you flip to another platform. And then when you win, probably flip back at their own pleasure. So basically, it undermines democracy. It tells a story that, look, our democracies are functional in the sense that the parties do not evolve from group of persons, shared assimilations, views and perspectives coming together to win power, but not just win power, but win power as a pretext to change society. Ours is just to win power for the sake of power.
Well, just like vote buying, I guess this has actually come to stay, you know, cross-carpeting from one political party to the other. But Mr. JEGA, let's take a look at the party at the center of this, at least for what we know. We know that Femi Fani-Kayode had hinted that no fewer than 22 senators on the platform of the APC might be defecting. The party's national president has also expressed worry about this particular situation. And from what we also understand is the fact that most of them are threatening to decamp because they have been denied tickets, just as Mr. AMADI has hinted, when you don't get what you want, you look for greener pasture. But what does this say about what's playing out in the APC at the moment?
Well, it's mostly in the APC, but it's not just in the APC. Some senators, some PDP senators, I think in Oyo State and in Sokoto State, defected to APC, and in Imo State, one PDP senator defected to Labour Party, and then about 7 APC senators in several states defected, some to PDP, some to NNPP, and things like that. And there is this claim by Femi Fani-Kayode that up to 22 others are thinking of moving, and that explains why the party chairman had a meeting with the senators, I think, yesterday. But you see, this is not really a new phenomenon in Nigerian politics. For some reason, there is a high casualty rate among senators and members of the House of Representatives in every election cycle, as much as 80% in 2007 and slightly lesser percentages in 2011, 2015. And what it speaks is that the political parties are really indistinguishable from each other ideologically and policy-wise, which makes it very easy for people to just jump. So they just see it as a vehicle to be elected senator. If the party does not field you, then you quickly cross over to a party that you have probably been lambasting for the past 4 years, and you have no problem at all doing that. So unfortunately, it does not speak well of the political parties that we have in this republic, or for that matter, the legislators themselves.
Dr. AMADI, ruffled feathers after primaries is not new, like Mr. Mahmood JEGA has just said. But a recurring reason that we've heard in this recent gale of defections is that there's lack of internal democracies in the parties they are leaving. How does that come across to you?
Well, again, just for history, July 2018, around 15 or 12 APC senators defected to PDP, just run up to the election. In fact, they included then some governors like Tambuwal and others who came back. So it's like déjà vu, history repeated itself. And again, like Mahmood says, the parties in Nigeria lack that rigor and ideological orientation. And of course, if you look at, compare with First Republic and Second Republic, when even UPN had directors of organization, the focus of party in the Second Republic was to build a party. Some of them were ideological, some social democratic, some, if you like, what you can call Republican today and all that. So the managers of this party, people like Ajulu Chukwu, people like, so several of them were people who were trained in the politics of management of politics, so they manage them. Now what we are seeing now are political parties that are not even properly managed. Like the APC, for example, they didn't have any convention until they had the elective convention for this NWC. These are parties that don't even have the BOT. So you are also seeing it's aggravated in the case of the APC because it lacks that kind of organizational structure. And maybe comparatively, their primaries had issues. Last election, we saw the Supreme Court vacate, nullify their candidates for some elections, especially notably in Zamfara and in also, I think, in Rivers or Bayelsa. So the Rivers State. So I think the problem is that, look, the parties internal democracy is weak. Even the mere process of following through their primary. The Electoral Act has clarified things. And today we're still struggling whether the Senate President of Nigeria should be a candidate or not in an election, or whether the governor, former governor of Akwa Ibom, former Minister of Niger Delta, ought to be a candidate. So these elementary things suggest some high degree of impunity. And again, a majority leader of the Senate got 0 vote of delegates in an election he ran, which is inconceivable in a democracy. He doesn't need to win, but again, probably those delegates were totally precluded from him. So we are seeing the backdrop of not just weak party management, lack of structure in the parties, but also very high level of impunity and some kind of criminality. Some would say that the party leaders on both sides, whether all these parties, basically don't care about the rules of their own party, not the rules of the electoral system. And so when people lose, like they have lost, many of the candidates lost. Governors who are going to the Senate to their position, in many cases, they are going to be bitter. And because parties win-lose, it's not like they have ideology, want to promote something, that everybody wins. They win-lose. So if you don't get a nomination, then you've got 0. So you just need to decamp and run. If the party is win-win. So even if you don't win a ticket, you are part of a movement to establish an order that you believe in. Then it becomes possible that you lose a ticket, you remain the party. So PDP has the aggravated case of weak management, lack of structure, and then seemingly some sense of recklessness in the way some of these primaries were conducted. All
right, Mr. JEGA, I mean, this is the election period as it is. I'm sure governance has taken a back seat in some quarters. It's a period to really garner support for 2023 elections. Whichever way you look at it, it's about, like he said, it's a win or lose thing in 2023. Do you think, how significant are these defections, the chances of these parties winning any of the elections in 2023? Yes, you are moving because your party doesn't, favor you for one reason or the other. But then for the other parties receiving them and for those who are losing members, how significant will these movements be, to the result in 2023?
You see, one of the problems is that state governors have near absolute control of party structures in their states. Now, in a situation where a governor is running for re-election, he does a lot of bargaining with opponents, with some of his commissioners and other aides, promise them senatorial and house seats so that they will continue to be loyal to him. That is how many serving senators and members of the House of Representatives get thrown out. Now, there are always these complaints about the process is not fair. But the problem with Nigerian politicians is that the process is only fair when you win. And perhaps the problem seems to be more aggravated in APC because it has more governors than PDP has. So in a state maybe where the party does not have a sitting governor, there could still be some power broker somewhere, but probably the field is slightly more level than where you have a governor who dictates who takes what, and that's how you have powerful aspirants such as the Senate leader getting 0 votes in a primary election, as Dr. AMADI said. Now, what effect it will have in next year's election, we will still have to find out, because you see, people are crossing from this party to that and back again, and some from the opposition party to the ruling party, and some are even going to the new parties like Labour Party and the NNPP. They are not new, but they are relative new factors in the 2023. So this process is just starting. Some may not even announce officially that they are defecting, but behind the scenes they do what the politicians call anti-party activity, because they are angry that they were not nominated. So the campaign will last about 7 or 8 months. So we may not know at this stage what full effect it will have until we are closer to the election.
Okay. Dr. Sam AMADI, a lot of critics have said there's no difference between the APC and the PDP, and that's why it's very easy for these politicians to flip-flop, like you said. But 2 things I want you to speak to that I've garnered from this conversation so far. One, you said the democracy doesn't win with all of this happening. You also said for the party, maybe win-win. So I want to know who truly wins in this situation. Is it just the politicians? How about their constituents? And secondly, we saw this time around with the Electoral Act coming on board, what the lawmakers tried to do was to diminish the powers of the governors. But it looks like the governors remain just as powerful as they've always been.
Well, I think a very good point. Let's take the last first. The legislators were shoddy in everything they did. I mean, it was like I said, they were preparing sausage, the cut, the mix and all that, and they lost the script in the process. First, yes, they wanted to stop the governors and probably the president from being overwhelming. And that's why they wanted to do direct primary, and they moved to indirect, but says everything has been democratically. But they got themselves out by not allowing statutory statutory delegates, where they also come in. Secondly is that even if it reduces to only direct ad hoc delegates, the point, like Mahmoud says, that as long as the governors control the prebend, the patronage and the benefits that you give to client-principal relationship, they're going to be stronger than senators who are in Abuja. And that's why you see budget pardon. Also, the senators want to also have some resources to fight back, because the governors control most of the resources. Again, the governors have the capacity, work with the president, because the president also needs them to support him. So they also have more access and more privilege. So what we are saying, therefore, is that, look, I don't know who wins, who loses. The only person who wins marginally is the person who gets elected because of all this. But ultimately, like I said, you see, democracy A party-based democracy means that the head of the democracy is the head of the party structure. So the parties are well organized. If they articulate people's view, like we saw in the Second Republic, parties like UPN, we saw Aminu Kano, PRP, we saw even NPN as bogus and bourgeois as it looks, had a nationalistic fervor and has strong organizing. It helps to deviate and remove the tendency towards conflicts. Today's society is so conflict-ridden because the parties cannot play any moderating role. They're not on the ground, they have no bureaucracy, they have no influence. So what we have here is that we are narrowing down democracy and making it just a case of a franchise to win an election. And when you win an election, you have no power to moderate conflicts in the bigger society. So the loser is the society, democracy. The winner marginally are the candidates.
All right, Mr. JEGA, just on a final note, what are your projections? What do you see playing out in the months to come?
You know, with respect to voters, most voters, senatorial and House of Representatives elections are not very important. Most voters in Nigeria decide which party to support based on presidential candidates and gubernatorial candidates, not necessarily in that order. But many people vote in senatorial, House of Reps, House of Assembly elections, sometimes without even bothering to know who is the candidate of which party. So in the end, the parties will win or lose the 2023 election based on their presidential and the gubernatorial candidates, much more than senatorial and the other legislative candidates.
Interesting point there. Really interesting point on how things are going to play out in the months to come. Thank you very much for joining us on this segment of Newsnight tonight. We have been speaking, of course, to Arise analysts Sam AMADI and Mahmood JEGA. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.